I've been cutting hair for 28 years. I think I had in my head that I had a profession to fall back on. Kind of always knew that this was a business that I could go into. In high school, I didn't fill out my superlatives as, I'm going to be a barber. In my mind, I thought that barbering was going to be easy. I thought my dad and my grandfather just sat here and hung out with their friends all day and talked and made money. I didn't really understand what barbering was, and I learned very quickly the first day. And even going through barber school, I never quite knew what I was in for. But my grandfather told me, he said, you have to do a lot of things other than just cut hair. You have to, you communicate with the people and your customers. You have to listen. You have to create conversation at some point. Some people don't talk a lot. Some people do talk a lot. You have to figure out, each person is different. Each customer is different. You have so many different things that you got to kind of navigate through with your customers and learn, because you're only as good as your last haircut. You think that you're going to come in and you're going to have these customers for the rest of your life. Well, you're not. You have to, each haircut, you have to make sure you put a good product out. And I think the hardest part for me was being a third generation under our barber, fourth generation pretty much of the Price in a business that had been established for 60, 70, 80 years at the time. So I probably put a lot more pressure on myself, knowing that eventually I was going to have to continue this business. I didn't want to be the one for it to, falter. My great uncle, my grandfather's brother, Carlton, started the business back in the middle 30s. We wanted to find the exact day our first day opened, but the records from 1936 it's hard to find. We found 1936 was, I think we found it was a phone bill or an electric bill that was dated to Price's Barbershop. That was how we were able to pinpoint 1936. Then my grandfather, he came in his early age after getting out of the Navy. He bought his brother out. His brother moved to Daytona, opened up a barbershop down in Daytona, Price's down there in Main Street. So my grandfather had the business on Cathedral Place over there by St. George Street. Then they moved, after about 24 years, they moved to the courthouse on the corner. He cut hair for 50 years. My dad came in when I was probably about 4 years old. So about 47 years ago. He came in, bought my grandfather out. My grandfather went to retirement. I went in before my grandfather completely retired. So I got to work with my grandfather and my dad. So that was amazing. About 8 years ago, my dad retired and I took over the business. Then until present day. The old shop we had a couple. We had like a snakeskin, a tarpon. It wasn't really big, so we didn't have a lot of wall space. So when we moved in here, we expanded to 6 chairs, and it's a pretty big barbershop, considering on a dynamic of the sizes of barbershops. So when we first moved in, I think we got a picture our opening day. We had 1 deer head and like a bobcat. When we first came in, we're like, what are we gonna do? It's just, there's so much wall space. And it just started out with Hank Westone, probably a couple weeks into our opening up in here. He was getting a haircut. He said, we got this big giant wall, there's nothing on it. There was a mirror. That was it. A couple pictures of some shrimp boats. And he's like, I got something for you. Next day, he comes bringing in. He brings in 400-pound marlin. So we put that up on the wall. And we're like, oh, that's cool. David Drysdale, Alligator Farm, same thing. He's like, man, I got something I can give you. So he comes down, brings an elk head. Funny story, he was out of the country doing something, and one afternoon his wife comes by. She's like, hey, I have something for y'all. All right, it was a Saturday afternoon, and she brings in an elk head. And we're like, what? I don't know if I have room at that time. She brings it in and has some guys, they put it in the floor. So we're like, all right, great. So we put it up. So David Drysdale's in here a couple weeks later, he's getting a haircut. And Dad's sitting there cutting his hair, he's looking up and sitting there, he's like, man, that elk, that's a nice elk. And I was like, it looks so, I think I have one pretty similar to that size. Dad was laughing, he's like, that's yours. His wife was remodeling and didn't even know, where it went. We hunt, so we have some stuff at the house, but we don't have the room. So immediately it was like, oh, we'll put our deer hoods up here. There's more people coming in here and looking at our, the mallets than they are coming to our house and seeing them. My grandfather told me when you start cutting hair, you have to lose your feelings quickly. They're going to get hurt. People are going to be like, oh, you messed up my hair, or you didn't cut it, will not get back in your chair because they didn't like your haircut. Some people are going to love your haircut. Some people are going to love the way you cut hair. Some people aren't. So that was kind of difficult to understand what he meant, to try to figure out, what do you mean lose my feelings? How do you do that? So I was able to do that pretty quickly. I was cutting one of my dad's customers, and about halfway through the haircut, he started talking to my dad, going, hey, Jeff, can you fix this? As I'm cutting his hair, he's telling my dad, he's like, hey, can you fix this, Jeff? I need to come get you to fix this. And I'm still cutting his hair. And the shop is packed. There's people everywhere in here. And I was just, talking about deflated. I'm like, well, what am I even doing here? How do I continue to do this? I got out of my chair, sat in my dad's chair. My dad tidied up, I guess, whatever I did wrong. And I had to check myself. I had to lose my feelings, so to say, and, come back to work the next day and put out a good product and take care of my next customer and my next customer and my next customer. So I kind of understood what my grandfather meant by that at that moment. I did redeem myself. He did get back in my chair and became my customer. So I was able to, right the ship with my feelings, so to say. It was a funny moment, but it was, I felt at the bottom. It was tough. But there's so many moments that are great. I think one of the first moments where I was like, I felt satisfied that I was making the right decision. I had cut one of my dad's customers, good friend of the family. I cut his hair. He left. Well, I got a phone call. And it was his wife, and she called and said that was the best haircut I've ever seen. And it really, I was like, oh, wow, that was great. Yeah, made me feel really good. It was tough being compared to my dad. Dad was a great barber. He was amazing. He could do any haircut. He was very well. Probably one of the best I've ever seen. Grandfather was the same way. He cut hair for 50 years. I didn't see him in his prime. Growing up, I never paid attention to what his work was, his talents. But, then coming in and being your Michael Price, you're going to have to follow Ellery and Jeff's footsteps and Carlton's and keep the Price name and the Price business going. That was a lot. It's a lot of weight, but it kind of felt like I was managed well and done a pretty good job. Our business is like we've had such an established business for so long, had so many families come through for generations. It's amazing because I know there was a time where me and my wife's family were out to dinner, and I saw one of my customers. He came up. He's like, hey, nice guy. I've been cutting his hair probably 8-10 years at the time. And we're sitting there, and he's, introduced me to the family. He's like, oh, nice to meet you, Mike. He's my best friend. He's, we're tight and this and that. And I see him every 2 weeks. And so when he left, my wife's like, well, your best friend? I'm like, he's like, I've known you since we were in high school, 10th grade. It's like, I've never met that guy. And I was like, well, I see him every 2 weeks. He knows everything about y'all. We share, it's not just about the customer's family. It goes both ways. You talk about your kids, you talk about your family, you talk about your life. You listen about their life, and then you talk about what they go through in their life, and what, it's kind of weird, because at one point it was, I had a customer, I cut his hair for probably 15 years. After like the second time I cut his hair, I forgot what his name was, but I could tell you his whole life story. And it was funny, because I'm like, eventually I just, it was too long. I went too long. I couldn't ask his name, but it was funny, because I knew everything about his life. He knew everything about mine, but it was kind of fun. And eventually found out the names. It's neat, because you do have that relationship with your customers, and it's the little things, like I might not remember the name, but you walk in, I'm like, oh yeah, we did a number 2 with scissors on the top, or you like the little short on the side. We have a lot of customers that do, they sail up and down the coast. So luckily we have a port here that they come in as they're sailing south to the Bahamas or to the islands. They stop in, they know they can come in here, do what they need to do, get a haircut, because we're here. And had a customer come in one time. I cut his hair the year before. And he walked in, and at the time we just did walk-ins, and I was available. He came and got in the chair, and I was like, how you doing? How you been? He's like, oh, pretty good. I'm like, you want to do the same? And he's like, the same as what? I was like, same as last time we cut it. He's like, you've cut my hair once, and it was like 9 months ago. I was like, well, yeah, we did this, and I went through the haircut, and he's like, yeah, how'd you remember that? I was like, I just, some just clicked. I can recognize 1,000 people by the back of their head. You see him walking down the street, like, oh, that's John. And John, he turns around, yep, how'd you know John? Looked in the back of their heads for, 28 years. Like, which, that's another thing that'll make you feel old. Kids that you were putting on the stool, now you're putting their kids on the stool. It was neat. When I started, I was able to do a lot of my grandfather's customers, because he had started on it, he was part-time. So when I started, I was getting a lot of his customers, because he was only working one day. So I started getting into his generation of friends, his, people that I cut now, they're great-grandfathers, so to be able to say I've done 3, 4, 5 generations, maybe 6 generations of customers, of friends in the family, is pretty special. It's just been blessed, it was a profession that I got into kind of at a time in my life where I was about to start a family, and I wasn't sure where I was going to go, and I was kind of scared to do it, but I thought it was going to be my best opportunity to provide for my family, and it's worked out really, really well. There was a couple moments that my dad has told me stuff. This is what you're to make it. You're gonna have to come in and give 120%. You have to dedicate your life to it, and he was 100% true, and you have but to be able to work with my grandfather, my dad, and not get killed by either one of them, that was great. That was the number one question. Like, how is it working with your dad? It was amazing. So